Hello everyone and welcome to Mountain Lake Journal. I'm Tom Halleck. This stretch of Interstate 87 behind me is seeing a lot less traffic these days. This past weekend marked the 1-year anniversary of COVID restrictions on the U.S.-Canada border. For more than a year now, cross-border travel has been limited to essential traffic, which has cost this region millions and millions of dollars in lost commerce and tourism. And it doesn't appear that's going to change anytime soon. There are growing frustrations over the fact there are no plans in place to reopen the border.
The restrictions that we've seen in place for the past year have pretty much been unprecedented in my recollection of time at the border in over 20 years.
The Champlain port of entry is one of the largest and busiest on the northern border. In 2018, more than 330,000 vehicles crossed the border through Champlain. In 2019, it was up to 342,000. Then COVID hit, and this past year, that number was down to just 30,000.
Our traffic has declined for personal travel over 90% since the start of the pandemic. Generally, we have a very large surge in travel for the summer months for tourism, which was mostly gone for the entire year, and that's new for us.
And it's having a ripple effect on nearby communities, like the village of Champlain.
It's been difficult because we are used to crossing that border easily, to go shopping, to visit family and friends, to go to events in Montreal or some of the small border towns, and of course we have not been able to go.
Janet McFetridge, who is the mayor of the village of Champlain, says people who live on or near the border are used to crossing it almost daily to grab a cup of coffee, go shopping, or head to Montreal.
And it goes both ways. As much as we want them to come see us and interact with us, we look forward to going to Quebec.
The loss of traffic has been a blow to the economy.
Well, it's been very difficult for local businesses. You know, we do depend on Canadians for a lot of the economic impact of the village. So our shopping center has noticed decreased revenue, from the liquor store to Price Chopper and the various businesses. That's been hard. We have a lot of Canadians that come down to live here in the summer, and they can't come down to use their boats, can't come down to stay at their camps. So it has been difficult.
The border being closed is definitely affecting our business.
And that loss of tourists and summer visitors trickles down to local businesses like Lakeside Coffee in Rouse's Point that sells coffee every morning to many of those Canadians who keep their boats at one of the marinas on Lake Champlain.
We noticed a significant decline in gross revenue. When the border closed, we rely heavily on traffic from Canada in the local marinas where they house their boats, and also through traffic in the local campgrounds as well.
Thank you guys.
Thank you. 70% of their business used to be Canadian. Now after COVID, it's mostly locals who are beginning to come back.
We noticed that there was a decline in with some of our local traffic that was frequented here quite a bit, understandably with the pandemic.
The loss of business from Canadians is being felt well beyond towns right on the border.
On a good year, and last year was set to be a good year if things hadn't changed, Canadians spend over $350 million in retail purchases in Clinton County alone, never mind the other neighboring counties.
Among the hardest hit, marinas along Lake Champlain. Up to 90% of the boats from Canada spent the entire summer out of the water last year. Campgrounds that also count on Canadians were largely empty.
From a financial standpoint, the entire county is experiencing a significant loss of revenues generated by the absence of our Canadian friends. And I think that will be felt for a long time.
Plattsburgh Town Supervisor Michael Cashman says to understand the effects of the border closure, all you have to do is look at the parking lots of local stores, like here at the mall, to see the lack of Quebec license plates.
I think it's still going to be a long while until people fully understand what that impact was, well past even when the Canadian border reopens. Sadly, under the previous administration in the U.S., there was never a plan put in place to get the border back open. So here we are awaiting the two governments to put together a process by which people can feel comfortable. Health and safety have to be at the front and center of it. But does that mean, do we have like a vaccine passport of some sort? Do we create different categories? But we have an interdependent relationship with our friends to the north. We need to see that border back open.
Plattsburgh has been lucky in that commercial traffic has continued to flow freely back and forth across the border, which has kept thousands of workers in Clinton County on the job.
We're fond of saying correctly that the border restrictions do not include commercial activity. And commercial activity has remained very strong, I'm happy to say. At the Champlain border crossing over the last 12 months, it's been up a few percent some months, down a few percent most months, so it's been pretty steady, which shows the strength of the supply chains and the commercial activity between Quebec and New York, and thankfully that wasn't interfered with.
So what will it take to get the border open again to all traffic? Business and political leaders on both sides of the border say getting enough people vaccinated will be key. And right now, that's a problem.
The vaccines aren't rolling out in Canada. Canada is woefully behind the U.S. We need to just say that forthrightly so everybody understands they are months behind us.
Most estimates are Canada is about 2 to 3 months behind the U.S. right now when it comes to getting residents vaccinated.
We're frustrated in Canada about the lack of vaccine, which is a failure of the government to a large degree.
Carl Moore, who is a business professor at McGill University, says Montreal is slowly coming back to life after a curfew and several-week lockdown.
So we've been in lockdown back and forth. The stores recently reopened. My wife and I went to see a movie in a socially distanced theater. We've not done that for almost a year. So it's something where the last year has been a very tough one.
The city's economy has taken a hit, not just from the loss of visitors crossing the border, but from around the world.
And we see a lot of New York license plates, Vermont coming up to Montreal as the big city nearby with lots of things going on. So we miss seeing those plates. We miss that. But again, it's not a big part of our economy. We have a lot of tourism, but it tends to be from other parts of Canada, China, Europe. A lot of people, as we speak French, come over from France. People flying from New York and LA. So it's something where the people that drive, it's a much smaller number than the people that fly from a tourism viewpoint. And it's really tourism from around the world. Like we have the F1 race, we have the Jazz Festival, we have the Laugh Festival, we have the tennis tournament, the Rogers Tennis Tournament. We have a lot of big draws that bring people to Montreal from around the world. That's what we're missing. So I had the owner of the Ritz-Carlton come to class recently. Tough times for the hotel industry, tough time for restaurants. A number of the restaurants in Montreal have closed in our neighborhood because they're just not the business there. Now they're holding on, some of them because of delivery or pickup, but it's really tough times. And I think when you come back to Montreal, you'll see a number of restaurants which are never going to reopen. And we see that in our own neighborhood, 3 or 4 that are closed and probably won't reopen. But there's still lots of great restaurants in Montreal, but it's been tough times for restaurants, hotels, and the whole tourism industry, which is a big part of the Montreal economy.
Within days of taking office, President Biden ordered the U.S. to reach out and talk with its Canadian partners about a plan to reopen. But so far, local officials say not much is happening.
And frankly, it's crickets in response. There just is no political will, no popular demand at the present time on the northern side of the border to move that needle. And we need to continue to do everything we can from our side of the border to keep the messaging going, to press our Canadian friends to say, wait a minute, we understand you're still distracted by ramping up your vaccination process and other things, but this is extremely important to the long-term relationship. We need to focus on this as well and do our best to get them there. But right now, they're not there.
Last week, while visiting a vaccination site in Montreal, the Prime Minister was asked how soon he thought the border could reopen.
I think we're all going to wait patiently until such a time as the health situation allows us to loosen border restrictions internationally. That'll be eventually, but not for today.
The U.S. did announce last week that it would help provide vaccine to Canada, about 1.5 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine, which has been approved for use in Canada. Local officials are hopeful that as more doses arrive in Canada, the restrictions could start to loosen. But they say the interest in reopening needs to come from both sides of the border.
We will continue to press those things. I'm less optimistic today than I was 2 weeks ago.
Just last week, the closure was officially extended for at least another month. And for now, officials say they expect the border will remain closed for several more months, most likely through the entire summer and possibly into the fall.